In a world clouded by distractions, deception, and half-truths, this podcast is your refuge for clarity, conviction, and Christ-centered conversation. Join us as we navigate the narrow path, challenging the noise of the culture with biblical wisdom, honest dialogue, and the hope found only in Jesus. Our story begins with our Muslim-influenced childhood, our experiences of Quran study, as well as the inconsistencies and injustices we encountered within Islam. Let's get started. I'm Hani Kianford.
And I'm Tanya Kianford.
And we are sisters. We are Persian. And we grew up here in Atlanta, Georgia.
We were born less than a year apart.
And for those wondering whether or not it's possible, it is.
We'll let you guess who's older. Okay, so we were born in Tehran, Iran. We moved to Atlanta, Georgia, mainly because, of course, our family was here. We weren't coming alone.
So we had grandparents here, and we had our aunts and uncles that were here. So we actually don't even know the reason why they chose Atlanta, Georgia, but they did. And we just followed suit. So our parents moved to the States after the revolution of 1979. A lot of Iranians actually moved out of Iran around that time because the government changed. There was a more Islamic government, and it wasn't westernized anymore as it was under the Shah. So when they moved here, they wanted to basically build a better life for us so that we could live in a modern, westernized country that had freedom to do what we wanted to do and live just a better life.
We were very blessed to be among the few, actually, at the time, probably, that got out, because as the years progressed, it got more and more difficult for Iranians to immigrate out of Iran. When we came, we were it was a very small Iranian population in Atlanta. I remember when we were young, we knew all the Persians. All the Persians knew all the Persians. And there weren't that many of us. I mean, now it's a completely different story.
Before the revolution of 1979, life was very different, believe it or not. What we see today is actually not how it was in the past. It was very much like here, very modernized, very Western. Women were free to wear whatever they wanted, which is a big deal because they can't right now. And you go wherever you wanted to. You went to parties. There were discos. It was just a very free, modern world, just like here in the United States. Very much like here.
I mean, we've seen pictures of our mom and our aunts, and they were dressed very much like the 80s here in the United States. I mean, they had the big hair and, the mini skirts or the long flowy skirts, but very, very pretty. The nice hairstyles. You would never have known that those pictures were taken in Iran. The Islamic revolution just, I mean, it was like black smoke over the country. It turned everything dark and oppressive. It's exactly what we see today.
Mm-hmm.
It's very sad.
It is. Growing up, I think we knew very quickly that we were different. Our culture was very different. Background is very different. We spoke Farsi, just very, very different from our peers.
Yeah, we only spoke Farsi. So I remember this little boy who we had befriended, who was a complete Southern, I hate to say it, but redneck, and his name was Kenny, and I'll never forget him. And I remember he had one of those big wheeler trucks. Yeah, it was a big wheeler trucks, big wheeler, and we used to ride around with him, and he spoke English, and we didn't speak English, and of course, these are stories that my mom has told us, but she said she would come outside because she would wonder, how are we playing with this kid who speaks English and we only speak Farsi? But apparently, we spoke Farsi and he spoke English, and we were able to play and get along. At a young age, you don't know that you're different until later on. But I feel like the division that we felt, the separation, was put was put on us from our family, and not so much from outside, which of course comes in going to school and dressing differently or looking different. And again, like, how many Persians were at our school?
Not many. Like, it was us and then one other Persian.
One other girl.
But I think also when parents come from a different culture, from a different country, such as Iran, they really want to keep the culture of the child. You know, they really want to keep that in so that we wouldn't forget.
You mean like forcing us to speak Farsi?
Well, yeah, that was the only way. And thank goodness that, you know, that our mom did that, because we're one of the few that actually do speak Farsi still our age, which is like a big deal.
My mom had a genius idea when we started to go to school, because of course we wanted to learn English. Like, I wanted to speak English, and I remember coming home from school and wanting to speak English. And my mom would just not have any of it. She would literally act like she didn't understand what we were saying, just so we wouldn't speak English at home. And I just remember crying. I remember crying and being angry with her because I wanted to speak English. I had just learned how to speak English. But she kept with it. And thank you, Mom. Of course, back then I didn't understand what she was doing, but language does carry culture. And the Persians are very, very attached to the culture.
And they want to keep the integrity of your culture and your background in the family for as long as they can, which is important, because they don't want us to forget, you know.
I mean, she even tried to force us to read and write, but I wasn't having any of that. I was like, nope, we stop with the speaking, but you can.
I did a little bit. I can a little bit.
Yeah, right. She can like read the newspaper. I'm like, what?
No, it's not that well. Our parents didn't really grow up as devout Muslims at all, really. You identify just because you're Persian as a Muslim, but they didn't practice it at all. Our grandmother, she was the only one that was a devout Muslim growing up. I remember coming home from school and I would see her doing her prayers. And I asked her, you know, what is it that you're doing? And she would be like, oh, I'm talking to God. But it was in Arabic. And I'm like, oh, I want to talk to God. She was like, okay. So she taught me how to do the prayer. So every day after school, that was our thing. I would come home from school and we would do the prayer together, and that was that. So I was really excited because I was there talking to God in Arabic, a language that I didn't even speak, and I had no idea what I was saying, by the way. But it was just very, like, that's where my spiritual journey really began, because I always knew that there was something bigger than myself out there, and I wanted to seek him. And I thought that was the way, was, you know, through Islam.
Well, in contrast, I had zero interest. I was like, okay,
I had enough for the both of us.
You do your prayer. I have to be home before the sun sets. Like, that's all I know. I'm gonna go out and play in the streets, and I just gotta be home before that sun goes down. Yep. You do your prayers. So very, very different in that sense.
It was very different.
I was more like a little tomboy running around.
She was.
We really started to feel the influence of Islam once we got to, for me, it was like elementary, middle school. The first time I realized that I didn't have the freedoms that they brought us to have, by the way. It was in elementary school. I remember being in PE class, and I remember crying and being very, very distressed about having to go to PE class, because we had to change into these little, what we know now as Sophie shorts. Gosh. And I had hairy legs, and my mom would not let me shave. And so I would get bullied. I would get picked on. When a Muslim woman shaves her legs or does any kind of like makeup or anything like that, that kind of introduces her to a more mature or an older age range, I guess, it's not permitted. It's not allowed. So in Iran, like, girls that hit the age of puberty, like 9, 10, is when they have to start covering their hair. They have to start covering their body. So by shaving your legs, you're kind of saying that you're an adult. That's basically it. So we weren't allowed to shave. It's like, no, it's okay. Go to school and be bullied over the hair on your legs. That's cool. Get, anxiety or whatever. That's cool. But you just can't, look like you're 16. That was the first time that I realized that not only was I different, but that my mom's values were different than the values of like my friends who did shave their legs and their mom didn't care. And that was the first time that it really affected me.
I felt it really through my friends, because I knew that I was different. So I knew all of this existed. But when I befriended all of the people that I went to school with, one thing that I noticed was that they were Christian. They were really the only ones that accepted me the way that I was, exactly the way that I was, with all the different differences between us. But they just accepted me with open arms. And that was very endearing for me. It was very sweet to see that. And I just remember being like, wow, that's so amazing that they just accept me and their parents, like all of them. And I remember thinking like, I want to be like them. Like, I want to be like them. Like, what's so different about them?
I remember I had a Christian friend that wanted to take me to church. And you remember we asked Mom and she was like, yeah, you can go to church. I'll never forget it. They had it was like a wooden bench, and all in front of you were these little blue Bibles in every seat. And we went and we literally sang the whole time. And I was like, this is great. Like, you guys just come here and sing. Like, this is awesome. So my mom was very open-minded, and she would let us. She would let us go to church. She never had an issue with it. Even when, like, if our friends wanted to come and do whatever, she was totally fine. She was very open until...
This is when I was 14. I actually told my mom that I wanted to be Christian. And
she did not discuss this decision with me.
No, I didn't. This was all on my own accord.
I was just as shocked as she was.
Yes. And when I told her that I wanted to be Christian, she wasn't having any of it at all. And before we knew it, she found this class where they learned the Quran, and we read the Quran. And for the next 6 years, every Friday night, she took us to this class, and we read the Quran in English, because of course we can't read it in Arabic because it's originally in Arabic, and we discussed it with our peers, and that's where we really met other Persians and Iranians our age, our peer group, where we could actually identify with, versus like the friends that were Christian that were not as close to us as the Persians. So I think that was also interesting too.
Unfortunately for my mom, we ended up asking questions that there were no answers to. And it started with, why we couldn't read the Quran from cover to cover. Why are we skipping around? Why does none of this make sense? Or why does it contradict? Why are we reading one thing, in chapter 2, and then in chapter 5 it says something totally opposite? So it did not make us like Islam anymore. Than the way we grew up. It actually, I would say, had the reverse effect. We were left with more questions than answers. Mm-hmm. I remember as a teenager, I think we were right around that 14, 15 mm-hmm. years. We went to the beach, and I remember my mom forcing us to wear T-shirts over our bathing suits because, well, you can't show your body. God can't see your skin, like heaven forbid, even though like he's God. So what was the problem? I never understood it, but we were literally forced to wear T-shirts on top of our bathing suits. And here I am, like almost drowning in the ocean with this like 10-pound, T-shirt on. But it was part of Islam. It was just part of the religion. And so when we got back, and as we continued to read the Quran, I found verses in the Quran where one said, lengthen your garments, which is fine. Okay, be modest. But then in another part, it would say, dress appropriately for your environment. And I was like, ooh, got her, I was like, well, if you're at the beach, shouldn't you be in a bathing suit? It says not to stand out. It says to dress appropriately. And I remember just, these little things that I found in the Quran that would contradict each other. And, again, it was always like, well, it's what's written and, we must abide by it, but never an answer that made sense. Never a solid answer like, oh, okay, light bulb moment, that makes sense.
Well, I also think that you're not encouraged to ask questions in the Muslim faith.
You're actually discouraged.
You're actually discouraged to ask questions. You're not supposed to ask questions. It's just, you're supposed to take them at their word, which that doesn't make any sense. Like, if you can't ask questions, like, what? Even though we were reading it in English, my biggest question was, why was it written in Arabic, number one, and why are the prayers that they do in Islam?
Well, I never did the prayers.
Well, we did when we went to the Quran study class. But why were they always in Arabic? That was a big question to me, because I didn't understand why God, who is, the God of the entire universe, why is he only speaking in one language? Like, why can't we speak to him or pray to him in our own native tongue? That was a big question for me. That's one thing that I never understood, and it just never resonated with me, even though I learned how to do it at a young age. But that's something that I always question too.
People don't read it, it's like, and it's not just Muslims. This goes for all religions. We can talk about Christians, we can talk about Jews, we can talk about any religious faith. It's like, how can someone truly believe something wholeheartedly and live their lives by it if they don't understand what it is? Had my mom not signed us up to read the Quran in English where we could understand it, we may still be Muslims, but because we read it and because we questioned it, it made us understand why we didn't agree with it. And when you know the truth, then it's a lot easier to walk away from what's false.
Mm-hmm. Also, like Tanya said, reading the Quran is very important in your own language. And I think it's discouraged to read in other languages. You're like in Iran, you're forced to learn Arabic, regardless of, like in Iran, you have to read the Quran in Arabic. And in Iran, they don't speak Arabic. So even if you are learning it, you're really not going to get the real gist, the meat of it in Arabic, because that's not your language. So it's really hard to really understand it when it's not even in your native language. I think that's one of the main things too. So
I mean, yes, and that's part of deception, right?
It's
like, if you can't understand
it,
it, then you can't question it.
So when we were reading the Quran, there were definitely some contradictions. I think one of the main ones that I remember was in one chapter, it says that you should not kill, which okay, that makes sense. You shouldn't kill anybody. But then in another chapter, it basically says, well, if it's someone that does not share the same beliefs as you, which would be Muslim, then it's okay. And that was something that just didn't make sense to me, because if you shouldn't kill, then you shouldn't kill. It shouldn't matter what religion or race or, gender or background or anything of the other person. If it's wrong, it's wrong. There shouldn't be any kind of stipulations for that.
I believe that there's a part in there that gives a husband the right to beat his wife if she doesn't obey.
That was another
So that
one.
was an issue. Yeah. So wait, what is the definition of obey? So if he says that I have to do something that I'm completely against and I don't obey him, then he has the right to beat me. Okay, that's not cool.
Oh, the other one is that a man is allowed to have multiple wives.
Oh, yes.
That was a big one. And polygamy is a big thing, even though they don't call it polygamy, but that's exactly what it is. And it's like, wow, wait, how is that okay? And the reasoning behind that they say is, oh, it's because, they did it in the time of war and there was like a shortage of men because the men were at war, so they could have, multiple wives because they needed to be taken care of. And it's like, I don't know. That doesn't that again, it doesn't make sense. It just seems like an excuse to allow that type of, acceptance.
And that's okay. Okay, we'll accept it. We'll say, okay, fine. That's cool. It was war. We understand. So are you telling me that God wrote a book that only would speak to wartime? So what about when we're not in war? What about when the war is over? So is this God not a God of all time? Right? Because if it's a book that is supposed to go through, generations and generations, then shouldn't it speak to all the generations? Or shouldn't it be clear about what it's talking about without us having to go to like 3 other books? Like there's the Hadith, there's other books that are supposed to clarify the Quran, but then the Quran says that it's clear. So, I mean, we can literally go on all day about the different things that we found. Never mind the oppression of women. They were never equal to men, ever. And whatever rights that it did give a woman, it was always within stipulations. They say Islam is the religion of peace. Now, I never found peace anywhere. In fact, I would say that there's more aggression than peace. But it's interesting because if you have to say you're the religion of peace, you're probably not.
Well, they've been talking about peace in the Middle East for how many years? And I don't think we've ever seen peace in the Middle East as of yet.
I don't think as we will ever will.
Yeah.
As long as Islam is running the Middle East, there will be no peace.
No. I mean, when there's oppression involved, how can there be peace? When you're oppressing, the people of a country. I mean, just looking at Islamic countries as a whole, Iran, or Afghanistan, Iraq, Saudi Arabia. I mean, when you just look at these countries, you see people who are oppressed, and people who are oppressed are not going to have peace. I mean, how is that possible? Because you don't feel like, you just don't feel good. You don't feel like you can't do what you want to do. You don't have freedom. You don't have that God-given freedom that we're all supposed to have. And how can you have peace?
And I mean, never mind that Islam pretty much advocates violence and, all sorts of things that are definitely not peaceful. So, and that was another thing also when we were reading the Quran, is there was no love. There was no love anywhere in that book. There was nothing to bring you comfort. There was nothing that you could read that would help you feel better inside. It was always this anger or aggression, which is, I mean, it speaks for itself.
Yeah. So we got to visit Iran twice when we were in around middle school and high school. And I think that was the very first time that we actually really experienced the oppression in Iran, or in a country, in a third world country, which it wasn't at the time that our parents were there. But that was when you really felt the oppression that women have to deal with on a daily basis. Because beginning at the age of 9, like Tanya said, women have to cover. So you have to cover your hair. You have to wear very long sleeve, cover your legs. You're not allowed to just go out wherever you want to go. You have to have a male with you at all times, like a family member or whatnot. And I remember one memory that really stands out is when we were in Esfahan. And we were just walking around, no big deal, with our cousins. And all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this woman shows up, and she looked really scary because she's covered, she's wearing this black hijab, and it's all the way down to her knees. Down to her feet. She's called a komite, which means that she is part of the policing that comes around and makes sure that everyone is wearing that is dressed appropriately. They don't have any hair showing. Their arm is not showing. They're literally policing and making sure that the women especially are not showing any type of body part. or any of their body is showing. And she came up to me when we were there, and I guess my hair was showing, and she kind of just came out of nowhere and started speaking to my cousin who was with us, and a male cousin, and she's like, okay, she needs to pull her hair forward. And I was frozen. Like, I didn't know what to do at that time because I was so scared of her. And I couldn't even speak. So he just kind of was like, okay, he just kind of mentioned, like, kind of like motioned over towards me, like, hey, pull your hair up. I'm like, oh, okay. And I'm pulling my hair. And she just kind of like, yeah, make sure that, that her hair is not showing, and make sure that they're dressed appropriately and this and that. And then her next question was, how do you all know each other? How are you all related? And that's a really scary question because it's like, what? Like, that's really weird. Like, never had anyone ask that before. And he had to explain, like, we were from America, we're cousins, we're visiting, and we're from the United States. We don't speak Farsi. He even said that, she doesn't even speak Farsi. And, even though I did, but like, he had to prove that he was our cousin just because he was a male and we were all walking together. Very strange. It's not normal.
No, I mean, that's part of what they do. So, which happened to us a couple of times because we were there all with our cousins and we all look about the same age. And so what they do is, which is scary, they separate everyone and they question everyone separately. And if your stories don't match up, like, they're coming to your house, like, they're going to come and they're going to ask your parents who so-and-so is and how you're all related. But it's interesting that while we were there, like, just our mannerisms, like walking on the street, people knew that we were from America. Like, I remember walking on the street and people screaming, they're from America, they're Americans, they're Americans. And it's like, how do you guys even know? Like, I haven't said a word.
Because we're like, our scarves are like to the side and our hair is like showing.
It's just,
and they're like,
yeah, they're like,
you don't belong
Americans.
here.
But it was scary at times, but we also had a wonderful time with our family. And even given all of that, all of the oppression, all of the control and scary moments, both of us were ready to move there in a heartbeat. I remember like coming back home and crying because I missed the family. And of course, we have huge families, so you're never alone. There's always like 10, 12 people around, and the food is awesome, and all you do is eat and, go walk the streets and just have a good time. So it was a fun time, even though it was very sad. It was very sad to see that people just didn't have freedom.
I think that the reason most people that are Muslim or they grow up in an Islamic household, the reason they don't ever veer off from it is if you do, you are shunned from the family, which is a huge reason why many people don't, even if they don't practice Islam. They just won't do it because their families are so important to them, and a lot of them are very close-knit with their families that they don't want to risk that. They don't want to risk losing their family's respect because it's not just one family member. It's like the entire family, like far and near members of your family that like they just shun you and you're no longer part of that family anymore.
And I think it's important to note that, Muslims are born Muslims. They don't choose it. It's not like any other religion where it's like, hey, you're free to go choose what you want to be. You're born into it, and that's what you are. I mean, there's no option, like the option of walking away is just, it's not there. And I also think that it's so ingrained in them from childhood, right? They read the Quran in Arabic, which is why they don't understand it. And it's just, it becomes a part of who they are and their culture. And it's hard to let go of something that you've had with you literally since childhood.
I think another reason why they don't veer off of Islam, it's because where are you going to go? What other religion are you going to choose? And that's a big thing too, because when you have, generation within generation of Muslim and Islam, and no one has veered off of that, it's like, okay, well, you don't want to be the first one to do it. And if you do, where are you going to go? The only thing that we really learned about Jesus was that he's a prophet. They did not say that Jesus is the Son of God or Jesus is God, or we weren't taught anything about the Trinity or anything like that at all. He was just a prophet. And that's what Muslims believe, was that Jesus is a prophet. And I think that's one of the biggest deceptions in Islam, because that is such a big part of Christianity, is knowing that he is God. But saying that he is just a prophet, that kind of just makes a divide right away, and Muslims can't accept that Jesus is God. So they're like, no. So automatically they're like, no, I can't be a part of this religion. I don't accept it.
If you accept Jesus as the Son of God, then you're basically like breaking like the first commandment. You're blaspheming God.
You're idolizing. You're idolizing. That's the biggest thing, it's idolatry.
Islam has done a really good job at taking away the top like three things that you need to know about Jesus. Is that one, he's the Son of God, that he died on the cross for our sins, and that he got resurrected, and so it's very difficult, as Hani said, very difficult for Muslims to accept Jesus as anything more than a prophet. For a Muslim to say that God has a son is like basically saying that he's human. And I remember I don't remember who it was. It was like, really? Like, you guys think like God would like go to the bathroom and like burp and do things that like a human would? Like, wow, like that is like they just disbelief. They cannot believe it. They put God so high up that nobody and nothing is next to him, which is great. But then that takes away Jesus also.
So finally, after 6 years of attending this Quran study class,
our 2 trips to Iran.
Yes, our 2 trips to Iran, where we had firsthand experience with oppression and dealing with that, we decided that just Islam is not for us. Like, it is not. This cannot be the God that like I believe in, because the God that I believe in does not oppress people, does not oppress women, does not minimize women and take away their freedom and all of these things that we see in Iran and other Middle Eastern countries. That's not the God that I believe in. That's just not it. And we decided to walk away from it, walk away from Islam.
Our rejection of Islam had three main.
Yes.
I mean, there was a lot of stuff.
There was a lot.
If we were to count on that, we'd be here all day. But the main 3 points was the violence and aggression that's found in the Quran, the oppression of women, and the contradictions, the many contradictions that we found ourselves. And then on top of that, no real answers, like no definite answers. And then, some would answer it, but they would have to go to another book called the Hadith that was written by men way years later, in order to come up with answers. So it was easy. It was easy walking away after that.
It was.
I don't think we announced that we were walking away. I think we
We just did it quietly.
Yeah, we like
tiptoed
tiptoed
out. Yeah.
we tiptoed out the back door.
We did.
Because, again, it's like not really accepted. But at the same time, it's like we live in a free country. If we can't walk away in a free country, then, we're in big trouble. So we did. We quietly walked away. We never went up to Mom and said, "Mom, we reject Islam." But she knew that we did, but it was kind of like better if it was unspoken, you know. And in the Persian culture, a lot of things are better.
Yes.
Just the unspoken. We're just gonna like, you know, like just walk by each other and not say anything. Once I decided that Islam wasn't for me, and I walked away, I was absolutely turned away from all organized religion. You know, I like to say that I threw the baby out with the bathwater. You know, it was like I did not want anything to do with any kind of religion, but I still knew there was a God. You know, in my heart, I knew there was a God. I didn't know who he was or how to find him. So I relied on her for that.
Interestingly, even when we went to a Quran class, I never prayed to Allah. Like I don't know. That just didn't register to me that Allah was God. I don't know why, even though that is the belief, but that didn't resonate with my heart. Like I knew that there was a God, and I knew from a very young age that there was something bigger than myself that I was seeking. And I think that as humans, whether we're aware of it or not, we naturally want to worship, you know, something because we know that there is something bigger than us out there. Now, whether or not we want to admit that to ourselves, that's another story. But interestingly, even though, you know, going back to like my Christian friends and I wanted to be like them, that thought actually never came to my mind, like, oh, let's go, you know, what about Christianity, you know, and, you know, all
You just
that.
like to go to church and light candles.
Yeah. And I would do all the things, but for some reason, like Christianity never entered my mind, which I don't understand why that never happened. Because I would, we had a church next to our house growing up, and I would go, and it was a Catholic church, but I would go because I know that they, you know, they like to go light the candles and do a prayer and this and that.
I never stepped foot in that church.
And I was there like every week, it seemed like, and I would pray, and I met some very nice people there, very, very nice people. And they would pray for me, and, you know, we would talk and build friendships. But again, it just never dawned on me to go and seek Christianity and go learn, you know, what Christianity was all about. I actually went through a lot of dark times during high school, and I would go there and I would seek refuge, and it actually did help a lot. I felt heard. That, like, I felt the presence of God there, which I never had felt before. Even going to Quran class and studying the Quran, I didn't feel like comparing the two. I didn't feel the presence of God there, but I felt the presence of God at the church. And I met so many great people there and like built so many great friendships, and they would pray for me. There was this one guy I'll never forget. He was from Bangladesh, I think, and he had moved here, and he saw me, you know, he would always see me coming there, and he's like, "Are you Christian?" And I'm like, "No, I'm just here to pray." He's like, "Okay."
I'm sure he was like, "This weirdo."
Yeah,
she's not
no,
Christian.
He wasn't at all. He was actually
he comes to light her candles.
Yeah. And I would go there. It was, yeah, he probably did actually. He probably thought I was this like weirdo. But he was so kind. And one day he was like, you know, like, I see you coming here on the regular. I see you coming here and praying. I'm going to do something for you. I am going to burn a candle for you that's going to burn for like 7 days. And I'm like, what? He brought out this candle. It was like this long. It was this humongous candle. And he's like, I'm going to put this here and I'm going to burn it for you for the next week. And I'm going to pray for you. And I was like, really? And I'm over there like sobbing. And he's like, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'll be okay. and he did. And, you know, I would go there and he's like, that's your candle burning. It's right there. And I'm like, oh, thank you. You know, and I just felt like, wow, I just felt better. But again, I don't understand why like Christianity never dawned on me to look into.
For the same,
it was like a block.
It's
in
for
my
the
mind.
same reason that a lot of Muslims don't come straight to Christianity, because they're so burned from religion. They're so burned from the oppression and the control and the anger and the hate that they can't imagine a religion that is love. they can't imagine it. I know I couldn't, because I had friends that would, oh, I'm going to pray for you. Oh, come to church. Oh, Jesus loves you. And I'm like, oh gosh, do not talk to me about Jesus. Like, I am so done with all of it. So it's because you're burned and it leaves a scar and it takes a while. That's why a lot of Muslims go straight to New Age, because it feels like freedom from oppression. I felt scarred when I left Islam. I felt deceived and hurt. It's like all this time that we put into reading and studying and learning and seeking. And in the end, it was like just a bunch of lies. It felt like the hole got deeper. It was never fulfilled. So then you start to question, okay, does God really exist? Like, is there a God? Like, is that the God that all these people are praying to 5 times a day, that is angry? Is that God? Because if that is, I'm good. I don't want anything to do with it.
It was like, I definitely felt extremely deceived, especially because I was doing the prayers and the monthly fasting and during the month of Ramadan.
You did all of it.
I did.
She went all in.
Dove in and I did all of it, and I did it for years, thinking that this was, the God that I was seeking. And at the end of the road, it wasn't. And I couldn't accept this God that would allow oppression and of people, of women, of just all these different countries that you see. Like, I just couldn't accept this God to be the one that I was going to worship. Like, it was just full of darkness in the end. I kept seeking the light, but it just kept getting darker and darker. And I'm like, okay, I don't know if there's going to be any light at the end of this tunnel. So I just had to be like, no, I'm done walking down this dark road. So Islam it wasn't it.
After we rejected Islam, we decided that it was not for us for many reasons that we've talked about. For the next 6 years, we kind of just wandered.
We did.
I mean, vulnerable and faithless. No.
And while we were wandering, we just fell into another trap.
We unknowingly slipped into New Age, and the deception is so strong and so thick that you get pulled in without even knowing, the direction that you're going.
So as we went down this wrong turn and we tripped into New Age, we continued there for the next 14 years. That is another story that will be continued on the next episode. Thank you so much for joining us today on Narrow Path Navigators. We'd love to hear from you, so please leave a comment, like, and subscribe, as this is the best way to let us know that you're enjoying our podcast.
Tune in next week as we cover our second stop of our scenic route to Jesus. And this is where it gets interesting. We will unpack the lies and deceptions we experience in New Age concepts and self-healing practices, such as manifestations, meditation, yoga, plus so much more. Until then, have a blessed week.